From VOA Learning English, this is the Education Report. The Kibera School for Girls in the Kibera slum in Nairobi, Kenya, is the first school in the area to offer girls free education. It provides free tuition, uniforms, books, and meals to girls who qualify. The students are from pre-kindergarten through the 4th grade. The school gets its support from the surrounding community by providing people with much-needed services. The people of Kibera struggle to provide themselves with food, shelter, clean water, and good schools. Girls face the additional problems of discrimination and violence. Parents and guardians usually withdraw their daughters from school rather than their sons when money is lacking. So, the Kibera School for Girls works to help the community understand the value of education. Parents do not have to pay, but a family member must work at the school 5 weeks a year as a way to support a child's education. Girls are chosen based on the potential for their success as students and on financial need. Helping women make better futures is why Kennedy Odede established the school almost 4 years ago. He says that growing up in Kibera, he hated seeing that more boys than girls went to school. In 2004, Mr. Odede started a community movement that later became the organization called Shining Hope for Communities. He wanted to make life better for girls as well as boys in poor neighborhoods. Mr. Odede says he wanted everyone in the community to feel improvement in their lives. Today, the school provides services for everyone in the area, not just students. For VOA Learning English, I'm Alex Villarreal.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Education Report in Special English. Today, schools in the United States communicate with parents in many different ways. Mail is still used, but now schools and parents connect through email, Twitter, Facebook, Tumblr, and Skype. The Houston Independent School District in Texas has more than 200,000 students. Most of them come from lower-income families. The newspaper Education Week recently reported on a digital literacy training program that the district has started for parents. Microsoft helped the school district establish computer training centers for parents at 5 of its campuses. Other schools around the country are also increasing their digital services, and not just in English. Many schools provide information in Spanish and other languages. Free online translation sites can also help parents stay informed about their children's education. Some school systems even give parents online access to their children's grades and schoolwork. 600 students attend Knapp Elementary School near Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Joe Mazza is head of the school. He says nearly 1 in 5 of his students come from Bangladesh, and 12% come from South Korea. Joe Mazza says the most important way that a school gets to know parents is in face-to-face meetings. But under his guidance, the school has added social networking tools to meet the needs of the community. The school uses resources like Twitter, e-newsletters, and Skype. Teachers can talk to parents over Skype if the parents cannot attend a conference in person. Social media, Joe Mazza says, is providing us with many new and really free ways to connect with parents. For VOA Learning English, I'm Laurel Bennett.
This is the VOA Special English Education Report. A program in the United States brings scientists and engineers into elementary schools to teach teachers more about how to teach science. Dave Weiss is a retired engineer. One day each week, he volunteers at Georgian Forest Elementary School in Silver Spring, Maryland, near Washington. He works with teacher Fred Tanique on science projects for 10-year-olds. He says, Fred is so enthusiastic, and he's so much fun with the kids. I can see that he really loves what he's doing. I get as much pleasure from helping the teachers as I do helping the students. Student Jada Lockwood says she enjoys Mr. Weiss's visits to her classroom. She likes the drawings he uses to explain scientific ideas. The American Association for the Advancement of Science sponsors the Senior Scientists and Engineers program. Dave Weiss has been a volunteer in that program for many years. The scientists and engineers help teachers in elementary schools improve their skills. Mr. Weiss says he and the other volunteers help teachers by providing hands-on expertise. He notes that science is an area in which many elementary school teachers have limited experience. In elementary school, for the most part, your regular classroom teacher is responsible for teaching science, along with reading and math, and if they don't have a strong science background, just by nature, they're going to tend to underrepresent science in the curriculum. Fred Tanique agrees. He just started teaching science classes a few months ago. He says, a lot of times I'll spit out information I learned in the book or things that are part of the curriculum. Dave helps me learn how to supplement that information so that it's more relevant to them, so that it will be more relevant to their work experience later on in life. 15-year-olds in the United States scored about average in science among countries that took part in testing by the OECD in 2009. The OECD is the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. But Dave Weiss says he is hopeful for the future. He says he tries to give elementary school students a solid foundation. His hope is that they'll develop a curiosity about what's going on around them. For VOA Special English, I'm Carolyn Presutti. We have more programs at voaspecialenglish.com, where people can read, listen, and learn English with texts, MP3s, and activities. We also offer English lessons at the VOA Learning English page on Facebook.
This is the VOA Special English Education Report. More than 40 of the 50 American states have approved what are known as the Common Core State Standards. These are lists of content that students are supposed to learn at each grade level from kindergarten to high school. State governors and schools chiefs led the effort to develop the standards. The project involved teachers, administrators, experts, and public comments. The final standards were released in June of 2010. Acceptance is voluntary, but acceptance helped states that entered President Obama's $4 billion Race to the Top competition for school reform. The standards are for English language arts and math. Supporters say these provide clear goals to prepare students to succeed in college and in jobs. But critics of national standards say the idea goes against one of America's oldest traditions, local control of education. Political conservatives generally oppose federal intervention in schools. Yet it was a Republican President, George W. Bush, who expanded testing requirements to show that public schools are making yearly progress. Still, opponents of national standards call them one-size-fits-all. They say the idea does not make sense for a country as large and diverse as the United States. One of those opponents is Bill Evers at the Hoover Institution at Stanford University in California. He was an assistant education secretary under President Bush. Mr. Evers warns about closing the door on innovation by locking in a national uniform bureaucratic system. He says the states don't have a problem in setting their curriculum. They've been doing it ever since there have been public schools. Richard Riley was Education Secretary to President Bill Clinton, a Democrat. Mr. Riley says conservatives would be concerned if we had federal mandated Common Core standards. That's not what we have. It's a state-driven measure. High standards, challenging work for young people across the country. Mr. Riley says in the 1990s, he pushed states to develop their own statewide standards. But some of those standards were not very strong, he says, so he believes national standards are needed. But Bill Evers says technology now makes it easier to develop individual learning plans for students. He says schools should worry less about a common curriculum and more about improving teacher quality. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal. You can find a link to the Common Core Standards at voaspecialenglish.com. I'm Alex Villarreal with the VOA Special English Education Report. Last week, we talked about the conflict between sleepy teenagers and early morning classes. Many people commented on our website and Facebook page. For example, Damla Ece in Turkey wrote, "I agree with the idea of starting lessons later so teenagers can feel better in the morning. But sleeping more than 7 hours can be wasting time for students." Tron in Vietnam disagreed. "I think teenagers, on the average, need 8 to 10 hours of sleep every day. It's useless trying to force them to concentrate while they can't concentrate." Enilton Nemakes in Brazil goes to sleep late and wakes up in the afternoon and wrote, That's my life, but at least I am studying. Afshin Haydari from Tehran says schools should start early to avoid heavy traffic later in the morning. And Susie from Jordan wrote, "When I was a teenager, I enjoyed taking my courses as early as possible. That way, I could find a long time in the day to do my own activities." But Azra from Kyrgyzstan said the reason schools start early there is a lack of classrooms. Omid in Afghanistan calls teenagers the destiny makers of a society, so they must be more alert and active in order to be more successful. And Joruji in Japan wrote, "When I was a teenager, I used to get up before 6 to go to school, which was far from home, and I don't remember having problems. I think nowadays the internet, TV, games, and cell phones make teens go to sleep later." 30-year-old Kika in Spain says, "In my opinion, young people are very lazy." But Dennis Jin disagrees. He says for high school students in China, we must reach class at 6:20 in the morning and be back home usually at 10 in the evening. Then we'll have some extra schoolwork to do. Teenagers are not the only ones who suffer. Kathy in Canada wrote, "My daughter likes complaining about everything in the morning, and I know that this is from lack of sleep. I wish schools should change their start time to 8:30 or 9 a.m. Vidara Mom, a Cambodian living in New Zealand, says school starts at 9 and finishes at 3 p.m. Therefore, the students have heaps of time to interact and play before they go home." Wibi Sebastian from Indonesia wishes school started at 7:30 instead of 7, but tells students don't forget to eat breakfast. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal with the VOA Special English Education Report. Today, we remember a man who was considered one of the best teachers in the United States. Jaime Alfonso Escalante was born in 1930 in La Paz, Bolivia. Both his parents were teachers. He taught math and science in his home country for 12 years. In the 1960s, Jaime Escalante and his wife Fabiola came to the United States. During the next several years, he learned to speak English and repeated his college education and teacher training. In 1974, Mr. Escalante was hired at Garfield High School to teach mathematics. The school was in a poor area of Los Angeles, California. Many of the students had serious problems with illegal drugs, gangs, and violence. The school was in danger of losing its official approval to operate. Mr. Escalante's students were mostly Mexican Americans from a Spanish-speaking area of the city. Many were the worst students at the school and thought to be unteachable. But Mr. Escalante pushed the group to work hard. He told them basic math was too easy and that they had the ability to do harder work. He told his students that he believed in them, but they must have the desire to be successful. Jaime Escalante started an advanced math program with a small group of students. Advanced placement is a program of college-level classes and tests. In 1982, 18 of his students took the Advanced Placement Test in calculus. They all passed. Officials at the testing company suspected the students of cheating. Mr. Escalante protested. He said the students were being rejected because they were Hispanic and from a poor school. He urged his students to take the test again. 12 of the students repeated the test, and again, all of them passed. 5 earned top scores. Mr. Escalante's students went on to become engineers, scientists, and university professors. The advanced math program at Garfield became extremely successful over the next several years. Jaime Escalante received many teaching awards, including the Presidential Medal of Excellence in Education. A movie about his success, Stand and Deliver, was released in 1988. It influenced other teachers to use his methods. Jaime Escalante retired from teaching in 1998 and later moved back to Bolivia with his wife. He died earlier last year. He was 79 years old. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal.
This is the VOA Special English Education Report. Priscilla Nangarai of Kajiado, Kenya, retired as a teacher in 2005. Today, at the age of 62, she could be living a quiet life in retirement. Instead, she leads an organization at her home called GRACE, the Girls' Rights Attention, Care, and Rescue Center. She tries to rescue Maasai girls from early marriage and make sure they get an education. She has rescued more than 700 girls since 1986. She now has 15 girls at her center, and she is building a dormitory to house up to 80 girls. In the traditional culture of the Maasai people, fathers often promise their young daughters in marriage to older men. Most girls are between the ages of 12 and 14, with some even younger. Their bodies are not ready for sex and childbirth, but that is not the only problem. Most of them must also leave school. Priscilla Nangarai's older sister was forced into marriage at a young age, but demanded that Priscilla receive an education. She says the problem begins when a girl gets booked when she is very young or not even born yet. She says booking is when a man goes to a family, and if there are little girls there, he can book a marriage with one of them. If one of the wives is expecting a baby, he will say, "I want something from this womb," and he can do that. A 14-year-old girl named Roslyn has been at the rescue center since 2008. At the age of 4, she was booked to a man who she thinks was about 60 to 70 years old. "Yes, I was booked," she says, "but when I knew the person that booked me, I just talked to Miss Nangarai. I told her the whole story." Maasai culture calls for the man who wants to marry a girl to start paying the girl's father once the booking has been made. Traditionally, the payment is made with cows, but today money can also be exchanged. When the marriage will soon take place, the girl must undergo a custom that some call female circumcision. Others denounce this practice, followed in Maasai and other cultures, as female genital mutilation. A 13-year-old girl, also named Priscilla, was brought to the center at the age of 5. Her mother wanted her to be educated. The girl says she is thankful, especially for health reasons, that she did not have her sex organs cut. She worries that she could have gotten AIDS from unclean tools. And that's the VOA Special English Education Report. Our website now has a weekly Words in the News quiz. Test your vocabulary at voaspecialenglish.com. I'm Mario Ritter.
This is the VOA Special English Education Report. Many rural areas in the United States have no doctor. Some medical schools are trying different ways to treat the problem. One idea is to educate doctors in smaller communities and hope they stay. Dr. William Cathcart-Rake heads a new program at the University of Kansas in the Midwest. He says, "We need more docs. There's somewhere like a quarter of all of our physicians in Kansas are 60 years of age or older. So we need to be replacing physicians too." He says medical students from rural areas now typically study in Wichita or Kansas City, two of the biggest cities in Kansas. They say, I really have every intention of coming back to rural Kansas, but they meet a soulmate, they get married, their soulmate happens to be from a big city, and we never see them again. The program is based in Kansas' 10th largest city, Salina, home to about 50,000 people. Salina is about a 3-hour drive from Kansas City, past fields of corn, soybeans, and cattle. Student Claire Hinrichsen grew up in a town of about 600 people. One reason she likes the Salina program is because of the size. There are only 8 students, the smallest medical school in the country. Classes are taught by professors in Salina or on a video link from Kansas City or Wichita. Students who complete the 4-year program will then do their residency training in a small community in the surrounding area. One place a resident might work is the Clay Center Clinic, where Dr. Carrie Murphy is a family physician. Dr. Murphy says, "This is a clinic that has currently 8 doctors and 4 mid-level practitioners, and we cover, of course, this town, but we also have satellite clinics in 2 nearby towns. We just kind of operate as what I call a cradle-to-grave operation. We deliver babies and go all the way up to doing nursing home care." Rural doctors generally serve older, poorer patients. Going into a specialty in a big city can mean better working hours and more money to pay off student loans. The Salina program will pay tuition for each year that students practice in a rural area in Kansas. Dr. Cathcart-Rake hopes 4 years of medical school and 2 years of residency will be enough time to put down roots. In his words, it's going to be, hopefully, harder for them to break away from those roots and go to bigger cities. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal. This is the VOA Special English Education Report. More than half of young black men in the United States do not finish high school. Many grow up without fathers and in neighborhoods with gangs, drugs, and violence. 60% of those who drop out of school have spent time in jail by the age of 35. Joe Marshall co-founded the Omega Boys Club in San Francisco, California, 23 years ago. Mr. Marshall tries to give boys and girls a safe refuge and a chance at a better future. Every week, he has 2 basic messages for his young students: stop the violence and don't do drugs. Mr. Marshall spent 25 years as a teacher and administrator in San Francisco. He taught math in middle school and expected to see his best students go to college. But he said a lot of his former students ended up dead or in prison for selling drugs or being involved in gangs. And many girls ended up getting pregnant. The Omega Boys Club serves more than 400 young people every year. 2 times a week, it offers after-school classes in math, reading, family and life skills, and college preparation. In many ways, it serves as a kind of family. It provides teenagers with structure and support. Joe Marshall has a doctorate in psychology. He sees gangs and violence as a disease that needs to be dealt with as a public health problem. He tells young people to follow some new rules for living. These rules will decrease their chances of ending up dead or in prison and increase their chances of staying alive and free. The club represents the headquarters of what he calls the Alive and Free movement. But his most effective way to spread his anti-violence message is through radio. In 1991, Joe Marshall started Street Soldiers, a weekly call-in show. It airs on popular hip-hop station KMEL in San Francisco. Marlena was one of the graduates of the Omega Boys Club. She is at Southern University right now, going into her 3rd year. She talked about what she had learned by coming to Omega. The club provides guidance and financial assistance to help students stay in school. Over 90% of members who were accepted into college have graduated. 12 other American cities have copied the program. Joe Marshall has been invited to speak in Canada, Nigeria, South Africa, and Thailand. He turned 63 this year. He says he has no thoughts of retiring anytime soon. And that's the VOA Special English Education Report. From VOA Learning English, this is the Education Report. Parents in South Australia's Aboriginal areas may lose some of their financial aid if they do not send their children to school. New rules link school attendance with government assistance to people living in poverty. Warren Mundine is Prime Minister Tony Abbott's top advisor on issues concerning Aboriginal Australians or Aborigines. He disagrees with linking the aid to school attendance. Instead, he urges the government to find ways to improve attendance without punishing parents. He says he thinks strong punitive measures should be the last plan of action. Mr. Mundine says the situation can change if tribal leaders support education. He says the government needs to work with parents and communities to make what he calls a massive cultural change. Other officials argue that the threat of stopping aid will force families to take education more seriously. In South Australia State, only 50% of children stay in school after the age of 15. In some areas, as many as 90% of Aboriginal children struggle to read and write. The state government says it has special programs for Aboriginal students. It says students work with their parents and teachers to develop a personal learning plan and re-examine it every year. Public schools also have people available who can work individually with Aboriginal students who need extra help. And there is a program that helps Aboriginal students deal with the change from middle school to high school. About 670,000 Aborigines live in Australia. The state of Western Australia also has special programs for these native peoples and other groups. For VOA Learning English, I'm Alex Villarreal.